I'm Jack Fitzpatrick and welcome to Jack's Wild West History. Today we're going to talk about Brushy Bill Roberts, who was basically, if you don't know, he was the guy who in 1950 claimed to be famous outlaw Billy the Kid. Personally, I believe he was telling the truth. I entered into this believing the official story. As I read more and more, it became more apparent to me that Brushy Bill Roberts was telling the truth. So here is my best evidence to convince you of the same thing. But obviously, please do your own research. Don't take my word for it. Read, Google things. Either way, it's a fascinating subject. And here we go. In 1990, a study was conducted at the University of Texas which used the same facial recognition software as used by the FBI, the CIA and Interpol. And it was a study which resulted in, quote, a significant level of statistical validity. So basically what they did is they took the iconic tintype of Billy the Kid that we've all seen before, and they compared that with a photograph of Brushy Bill Roberts, aka William Roberts, at the age of 71. Now these two photos resulted in a 93% accuracy in terms of them being likely to be the same person. At the time, Arkansas attorney Helen Grinder stated that the evidence provided, both statistical with the facial recognition technology and the circumstantial evidence, means that, quote, the likelihood that they were the same person was strong, substantial and excellent. So with the technology and facial recognition side of the argument out of the way, let's move on to the circumstantial evidence. So, on the night that Billy the Kid was allegedly killed by Pat Garrett at Pete Maxwell's house, there were only two other people present other than Pat Garrett and allegedly Billy the Kid. Those were Deputy US Marshals John W. Poe and Deputy US Marshal William McKinney. So after Pat Garrett had pulled the trigger, they went to examine the body to make sure it was Billy the Kid. John W. Poe was the first guy that looked at the body carefully, and he told Pat Garrett that he had shot the wrong man, although officially he did side with Garrett's side of the story. He was recorded as telling Garrett that he originally thought that he'd shot the wrong man. William McKinney, the other Deputy US Marshal who was present, agreed with Pat Garrett on the official story. However, years later, when he was an old man, he retracted his original statement and admitted, and to get it off of his conscience, that he'd lied under oath, and he admitted that Garrett had shot the wrong man and it was not Billy the Kid. What they used to do was, much like today, if a hunter goes and kills a deer, they'll stand next to it, kind of like bragging about it. You know, lawmen were very, very open to the idea of taking credit for killing an outlaw, and that never took place. Pat Garrett would later go on to write a book about Billy the Kid, in which most of it is proven later to be complete hearsay and fabrication and lies. So for a guy who spent basically the rest of his life bragging about how he had killed the famous outlaw Billy the Kid, you would think that a guy that was that keen to brag about the killing, you would think that he would be proud to take a photo of the body, but that didn't happen. Jesse James, when he was killed by Robert Ford, his body was photographed and displayed to the public, and also members of the Butch Cassidy Wild Bunch gang, such as Harvey Logan and Kid Curry. Now those pictures are available online today. However, I would urge you not to look at them, because they are, I mean, they're not easy to look at all. Even though they're in black and white, they're pretty gruesome to look at. So that's, apart from the fact that it was a 93% match on the facial recognition. There's two eyewitnesses that say that it wasn't the guy. The guy who killed him, Pat Garrett, was proven later on in his life to be a liar after writing the fabricated book on Billy the Kid's life, which was ironically called The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid. So as we move on through the evidence, it's getting less and less likely that Pat Garrett was telling the truth, and it's getting more and more likely that Brushy Bill Roberts was in fact telling the truth. So for a guy who's widely considered to be a liar to this day, Brushy Bill Roberts had a lot of information that proved to be true. He could identify he basically explained exactly the layout of the interior of Pete Maxwell's house where the alleged killing took place. So unless he guessed that, he'd obviously been there before. If he wasn't Billy the Kid, he had been close to Billy and that kind of, and his gang. He was able to describe in detail buildings that were present during the time of the Lincoln County War, which he participated in, which he fought in, probably be a better word. Buildings, by the way, which weren't present at the time that he claimed to be Billy the Kid. So if, again, he wasn't Billy the Kid, he definitely was around Fort Sumner, New Mexico at that time. So he was also able to demonstrate how he could slip out of handcuffs, which obviously not a lot of people can do. So he demonstrated that he had the ability to do that, which Billy the Kid was rumoured to be able to do. He was 5'8", like Billy was. He had the same colour eyes. One of his ears was bigger than the other one, which is very unusual. But that, again, like Billy the Kid, that he had that trait in common. He spoke Spanish, like Billy the Kid did. And there's some other facts I've forgotten about that I'll have to look at my computer for. No, we've pretty much covered them all. So, but even though we've covered them all, that's a hell of a lot of evidence for a guy who was lying. So what we got: same height, same colour eyes, spoke Spanish, passed the facial recognition test, knew the layout of Pete Maxwell's house, knew buildings present in the Lincoln County War that weren't present when he admitted to being Billy the Kid. He could slip out of handcuffs. I mean, it's getting more and more plausible by the minute that this guy really was telling the truth. Under modern day United States law, basically if let's say someone's on trial for murder and they want to know if it's the right guy, other than DNA evidence, if you scored a 93% facial recognition match, that alone is enough to uphold the conviction. Now, if that kind of evidence, facial recognition wise, is enough to say someone's guilty and put them in prison, then surely, if we're being right about things, it should also be enough to clear someone's name and say, hey, this guy's actually telling the truth. He's passed as a 93%. That's enough under US law to uphold a conviction. So in my mind, if it's enough to uphold a conviction, then we can pretty much say for sure that that Brushy Bill Roberts was telling the truth. I came into this whole thing, as much as it might not sound like it now, I originally thought that, oh, let's click on this story, let's see this old guy who's probably telling a few lies. So I came into it sort of, if anything, believing the official story, and I read more and more, and it's just, it doesn't seem very likely that that's the case to me. Each case has to be looked on without bias, and you have to weigh up all the facts on an individual basis. Every case is different. So if you wanted to say, oh, there was a guy who claimed to be Jesse James, let's say, you would have to look, that is a completely different set of circumstances, so you have to look at it in a completely different way based on those circumstances. After all the evidence, there are still people who believe the official story that Pat Garrett shot Billy the Kid. This kind of black and white thinking is dangerous in modern day terms because it's got no depth to it, and it's the reason that, especially in the United States, innocent men and women are in prison to this very day because of this kind of thinking, and because of the prison for profit kind of culture that America have got right now, unfortunately. So that's my 2 cents on the issue. Let us know what you think though in the comments. Do you think he was telling the truth? Do you think Pat Garrett was telling the truth? What's your thoughts? Let us know in the comments. If you've liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe for more content, and we'll hopefully see you in the next video.